So this week I wanted to make a crab. And to start it, I need all the colors. Now that I have all of my colors, I can begin to make a base. And because this has a giant tin can coming out of the back of it by the end, I needed to make sure that this base could really support a lot of weirdly balanced weight. And the best way to do that was to give it a very wide surface to stand on with a bunch of wire. So for this, I have 2 parts in the legs with a bunch of wire below that, and then 1 wire acting as the arms. This means that this is now the most complicated armature I've ever made, and it's only going up from here. This all gets connected together with some aluminum foil around the waist area to make sure that all of these are roughly in the same spot, and some clay covering the torso to lock it all into place. Now that the torso is locked into place, I can begin to cover the entire thing in a thick layer of clay in order to make the lobster look fat. I'm going to switch between crab, lobster, and everything else for a very long time in this. Yeah. So now that I begin to give him, his thickness, I begin to bulk out the sides as well, and then I give him a dump truck. This is done through giving him 2 slightly wider than average legs that get a lot wider on the lower half of the torso. And he just has a dumpy now. Then I remove a bit of clay off the edge of the legs in order to add the darker red at the very bottom of the legs, and then I add slight indents to the bottom of the legs so that it looks slightly more natural. After I have this, I can flatten a sheet of orangish clay and put that right along the chest, because that's what the design looks like. I then cut off all the X's, make sure that it looks all good, nice, and how it should, and then once that's all done, I can begin work on the head. The head is just a ball of clay that gets attached to the body. This gets mostly flattened, and then I push down a little bit so that there is a rough mouth shape, and then I realize that I want this crab to be looking almost backwards, so I then shift the entire head over so that it's looking a different way. After that, I get 2 flat balls of white clay and place it right as the eyes, before covering the bottoms, sides, and top in some worms of clay so that they look more like they are inside the head instead of on top of the head. I begin on the bottom, then work on the sides before finally adding a worm to the top that is slightly thicker and curved. Once all of those are added, I just make sure to blend them in so that they look good. And now that they look good, I can begin to work on pupils. The pupils, when they get added, start out as black dots. Just simple black dots. And then they get added to both eyes. Then a dark blue, very dark blue, a navy, worm gets added on the bottom part of the eyes, and then small white highlights are added in the top left corner. After all that's done, I slightly indent around the eyes for some design purposes, and then I indent a mouth right below the eyes. This mouth is rather small and agape, so in a more confused look, I would say. Not exactly, but after that, I add a little bit of darker black to the mouth, and then I add 2 antennas of a medium red between the one at the bottom of the feet and the normal red that is used for the main body. After those are added, I begin to bend the armature for the arms and cut them to the proper shape. Once both of those are cut to the proper shape, I can begin to add the claws and the arms. The arms are in 3 pieces. The first one, which is the upper arm, is just a stub. Same as any normal arm, it's a slightly ovular shape. These get added onto both sides and blend into the main body. After that, I add some more design to the head, and then I add a little piece of orange clay in the middle to act as a little bit of an undercolor, and then I add the final claws on the end. The final claws are similar in size, except they have slight indents of the 2 claws so that I can add the darker red clay more of a maroon to the end as its claws. Then this just slides on the end of the armature and makes sure that it's all good and looks good with the rest of the arm. This just happens on both sides, and once that's all done, I can begin work on the fork. He has a little fork. It's just a little wire with a worm of gray clay covering it, and then at the top, it's just a fork. This gets flattened out so that it looks like a fork, and then once the main fork shape is made, I can bend it up a little bit, and then add some rust-colored clay. The rust gets put where I think rust would go, and also where rust is on the design. A mixture of both, and then that just gets inserted into the hand and placed in a proper position to look good. After the fork, I get some translucent clay because this crab has a bandana of a trash bag. I just make one solid green color, and then wrap it around the crab's neck in a bandana looking shape, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just wrapped around the neck on both sides, cut to the proper size, and then a little knots type thing is added onto the back. This is just two little worms, followed by a circle of clay put in between the two thingies. Then the shape is refined, and I add the tail. The tail is just a little worm of clay that gets blended into the back. After this is blended into the back, I can then refine the shape as I normally do and cut off a little bit in the end. This end part, as usual, gets placed with the maroon clay on top of it instead. Then the shape is again refined, and I can add the tin can on the back that I referred to at the very beginning of this video. This gets covered in the same gray clay as the fork, so that there is no aluminum foil showing. After that, I get a worm around the part of the tin can that will be touching the crab's back, and then a flat sheet on the top to act as the top of the tin can. Then I indent a bunch of grooves into the backside of the tin can, and it's just to look like a tin can. Now, as you can see, there's still some aluminum foil showing, and that just gets covered away with that same rust color that was used before. This rust color then gets placed as much as I feel like, and then the tin can gets placed on the back. After the tin can is placed on the back, there's only one last step to do, and that's cover that ugly metal wire with some sand-colored clay. I just placed the sand-colored clay below it, and then a bunch of worms of the sand-colored clay on the top to hide the wire that is all over the design. Well, the base, so that it could actually properly stand up for the entire time. After all of this is done, it's finished.